please feel free to submit questions into the chat, and we'll look at those for our panelists when we get to that part of today's session. Also, in case you can't tell, I've never moderated a webinar before, so I ask again for grace in advance. I do want to acknowledge that not everything here today discussed will apply to everybody, but we hope that you take what works for you back to the entity that you represent. And also, we're approaching today from a solutions-focused approach. This work is really, really hard, whether you want to refer to it as teacher shortages in general, educator preparation. But what I'm really excited about today is to highlight people that are doing incredible work across the country, and also hopefully give them a chance to brag about themselves, because I have a deep, deep respect for what is happening. And if we have more of what is happening from the folks you'll hear from today, then at the end of the day, kids are going to win. A little bit about National Center for Grow Your Own. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. Our team, which includes myself, my colleagues, Miles Woodhall and Ben Gagney Maynard, we previously spun out of the Tennessee Department of Education, where after getting the first registered apprenticeship approved for teaching by the U.S. Department of Labor. And I'm really excited you're going to hear from the first program, Prentice Chandler at Austin Peay, is one of our panelists to share about his work. And also while in Tennessee, we were able to scale a Grow Your Own program statewide to 65 districts across 14 different ed prep providers at a cost of just under $10,000 per degree, of which the state covered the cost. So you could truly become a teacher for free and get paid to do so. And now we work with states and districts across the country to launch or expand Grow Your Own and or registered apprenticeships for teaching. And as of July, now principals with the work we were able to do with North Dakota. And so one of the other things that we have the honor of doing is we lead a free group for states called the National Registered Apprenticeship and Teaching Network, which as of yesterday just hit 25 states plus DC. So we're now serving 50% of the country. However, in our work, I think the biggest obstacle that we see when we're supporting a state or a district is that we do not yet have enough ed prep providers that are high quality and low cost. Fortunately, our first panel is filled with deans who are innovating and leading the nation. I asked them to join today to share about what they do, how they do it, so that others can learn and replicate what works. These leaders come from a variety of backgrounds, so I believe we're going to have a great balance of perspectives. And with that said, let's get started. If the first panel could turn on their cameras and join, that would be great. All right. Thank you so much. I mean, y'all, if you are attending today, you're blessed. These folks are heroes to me. They do incredible, incredible work. So I'm going to dive in because nobody needs to hear from me anymore other than the questions I ask. So with that said, my good friend and NCGYO advisory board member, Dr. Prentice Chandler, my question for you is Austin Peay State is well known for creating the first ever registered apprenticeship in teaching, but folks don't always know that your Grow Your Own work started years before that. Can you share about Austin Peay's initial work with Clarksville Montgomery schools and how you developed a free pathway to become a teacher?
Yeah, thank you, David. If you don't know David, he's the godfather of this work, so you're in good company. He's sort of, again, if you don't know his work, this is the primary spot to be. This is the primary source for information in this space. So I like to start our story with, there's the nuts and bolts of the program, how it's a 3-year program, completely tuition free. The students were full-time employees of the school district, all that technical stuff we can talk about later. What I would want the people in the audience, the 300 people or so, to know is that all of this starts with a belief system that you can do this work. I know that sounds sort of cliche and sort of simple, but before you can do this really hard, deep work, you have to believe that you can. For us, the context I was in, we started this work in 2017, and there were lots of folks that told us this was not possible, that there's no way we could pull off a program like that. By the way, not only were people in our college telling us that, the district was telling us that too. And so it wasn't just coming from one side. So what I would argue, the first step on all this work is for the EPP to change the way they see teacher ed. Like there's a major mind shift, paradigm shift that comes with doing this work. And I probably had conversations with people for about 6 months before we actually created the nuts and bolts and the structure and the framework of how it looks. So I'm going to list off 4 things I think folks should do. And again, this isn't the technical part. You know, David and the other panelists, we can talk about the technical part. This is more of the laying the groundwork and the foundation for trying to do this. So first off, I would say that we need to shift the way we view the preparation of teachers in general. That historically colleges of education educate teachers, school districts hire teachers, and that's really the connection. That's where the relationship begins and ends. With our work, creating a program where people can go to school for free, work full-time, be paid, have benefits, have a salary, all of that requires partnership work like never before. If you've heard me talk at conferences before, I call this big P and little p. Big P partnership and little p partnership. Big P partnership is working with your districts not just to place student teachers, but to solve these persistent issues that we have in teacher ed. So the teacher shortage clearly, lack of diversity clearly, and lack of folks in high needs licensure areas. If you can shift your partnership work to get at solving things as opposed to just run-of-the-mill operations. So that's number one, that the preparation of teachers belongs to both of us. And number 2 would be sort of opportunity mindset. I don't know of a whole lot of folks that say that the things we do in higher ed can't be improved. I don't know that session at the conferences that I go to where people sit around a table and deliver papers that talk about how the things we do in higher ed can't be improved. I don't know that session. So this is an opportunity for us to do things differently. Sort of scary, sort of freaks people out, but it's a chance to do things differently. Number 3, I would say, is to highlight how our interests and the interests of school districts aren't just similar, but they're exactly the same, right? That's a huge piece of good news. Classroom teachers, deans of education, superintendents, principals, classroom teachers, professors, staff, on down the line, we all want exactly the same thing, and that is excellent teachers. We want children to be educated. So we sometimes we argue with folks about the details, but let's keep in mind that we agree on the big important stuff. And then lastly, and this was a mistake I made early on, is to be aware of constraints, that you can't do everything for everybody all the time. You can do a lot of things for a lot of people a lot of the time, but you can't do everything for everybody all the time. And so when you meet with your partners, one of the things that you should talk about right up front is the things that you are committed to doing and the things that you simply that you can't do. And again, another piece of good news is there was very little that we could not do. And so all of what I'm saying, if you just put a bow on it, partnerships come at the very beginning. Partnerships above everything else.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chandler, for that. Sarah, some of your work has been featured on PBS NewsHour, and I don't know if I've told you this. My apologies if I have. But one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of your work is I'm actually a former college dropout myself, who, when I did go back to school, I went to a community college, and it changed the trajectory of my career. So Sarah, Dallas College is a community college that is able to issue bachelor's degrees in education. Talk to me about the incredible work you are doing to remove financial barriers for aspiring teachers and how your students are benefiting from it. Also, are there lessons that universities could be learning from community colleges about who they serve, as well as your cost effectiveness?
Yeah. Thanks so much for the question, David. I actually started my higher education career at a community college as well. And I was able to go to school because of the financial aid that I received, first from a community college and then a four-year institution. And so I definitely understand as well personally why it matters so much to have community colleges in this space. So what I want to talk a little bit about is I'll give you all a little bit of context around Dallas College's model, and then talk a little bit about some of the lessons that we learned that I think could be applicable to four-year partners who are thinking about engaging in apprenticeship work. So Dallas College is one of the largest community colleges in Texas. We serve around 100,000 students annually. And most of the students who we serve within the School of Education are working professionals, many of whom have dropped out of college and they're now coming back. We also have many students who are first-generation college goers. We started our program in 2021, and so for us, we were starting from scratch. And where we started was really thinking about what do our students need and how can we as a community college fill that need for them. And so what we knew is that our students, most of whom were working professionals, needed to keep their jobs while they were getting their four-year degree, and they needed to have the most affordable program possible. We are really lucky. So as a community college, our tuition is really affordable. We can offer a four-year degree in under $10,000, and that's before any kind of financial aid. So if you're Pell eligible, you're actually getting paid to get your four-year degree. And so the opportunity that this opens up for students who haven't been able to afford college historically really matters so much. But what we also found is that even being able to offer this degree so affordably, we still had students who we couldn't serve. So we had a good proportion of our students who had exhausted financial aid with the U.S. Department of Ed. And so we needed another funding source to support them. So we've been really focused on going after competitive grants at the federal level, at the state level, at the local level. And then we were also approved as the first program in Texas to offer a K-12 apprenticeship in February of 22. And so we've really focused on braiding any funding stream possible together to support our students and making sure that our program is completely accessible for working professionals. And so we offer all of our classes online. You can go to classes on the weekends, in the evening. And then the other thing that we really focused on is we didn't think it was enough to offer the classes accessibly. We also wanted to make sure that our students were getting credit for on-the-job learning. And so in the final 2 years of our program, about 50% of course credit comes from that on-the-job learning. With the way that we have developed our program, we had 100 students who graduated this May. More than 80% of our students are now teachers of color here in Texas. More than 90% of them are working in Texas public schools right now. And I really attribute the early success of our program. We just launched in 21 to exactly as Prentice said, partnerships matter so much. So we spent most of our time in the first year and a half developing partnerships with school systems and then thinking really strategically about the funding. And so for other programs, I would really consider, who is it that you're trying to serve in your program and what specifically do they need? Are you able to offer that to them? And if so, how? Because I think that it is definitely possible. It's a ton of work to do so, but it's also incredibly rewarding.
That's great. Thank you, Sarah. Dr. Jerry Haynes, first off, good to see you. Dr. Haynes is another NCGYO advisory board member who I got to work with closely back when we were both in Tennessee together. And so speaking of which, Dr. Haynes, you did incredible grow your own work, as well as we shared earlier with Austin P, but first in Tennessee, and now you're doing incredible work in Mississippi. And you were the dean of HBCU at Tennessee State and now at Jackson State University. Can you talk to me about the lessons learned in going into a new state? Also, what lessons were you able to bring with you from Tennessee State? But also, what did Jackson State University already have in place that you were able to build upon or expand?
First of all, let me say thank you, David, for laying the foundation in Tennessee for the Grow Your Own initiative and being able to fund the Grow Your Own initiative while I was at Tennessee State University. And to generate ideas of innovation with dual certification. And so what I would say, the lessons that I've learned in going in is understanding your stakeholders' needs. What is it that they need in order for it to be a win-win situation? And then to understand what your programs bring to the table for those type of students. We recognize the fact early on that we're not working with traditional students. And if you're not working with traditional students and they're online, what type of academic support are you going to bring to help them become successful? And our focus point was that if we recruit you, we need you to graduate and become a certified teacher. That's the ultimate goal, is for you to become a certified teacher. And so we looked at our program learning outcomes. We looked at the praxis exam, because that was another issue when you talk about serving minorities in the Grow Your Own initiative. What were the gatekeepers to keep them from being successful? And so we had to do some revising of the curriculum, the program of study, to align with the praxis exam, to the assessment that they were originally taken. We looked at persistence. It's very important for, once we got the students in the program, how do we keep them interested, right? How do we keep them motivated? How do we keep them so that they don't drop out of the program? And so that means a lot of tracking and monitoring of those students to make sure that they're successful. And then finally, the completion. Again, that was really the major driving point for us, is can we get them over the hurdle after they've gone through the coursework, that they actually become employed by the district, certified by the state. And that's when we included mentorship in our program of study. We included seminars where they had an opportunity every month to participate in a seminar regarding something that were aligned to the praxis exam. We included their support as far as coaching, tutoring session. We also built into our assessment system pre-practice exam with praxis questions, so students could actually access them online to take this, so they can get a feel of what that certification exam would be like if they had the actual take it. And we provided them constructive feedback on that exam, so that when they left the program, they were confident in passing the certification exam, because we had thoroughly prepared them for it. Lessons that I brought from TSU to JSU were, looking at how do we make have faculty advising, so faculty serve as faculty advisor to them to provide them academic support, tutoring, coaching, mentorship, looking at how we recruit students, right? Involving the district in the process, that it's not just a JSU process, but the school district that we're working with, they get an opportunity to identify those particular paraprofessionals or support staff that they want to participate in the program. And we come together to say whether or not this is a right or not a good fit for the program, and to make sure that they are committed, that it is a year-long program. It is accelerated. It's 100% online. And we added in Mississippi with the Grow Your Own a stipend up to $17,000 for those paraprofessionals if they maintain their grade point average, if, just some other things to keep them motivated in, because they're working after they get off our job to obtain a degree. So those are basically the things that we implement, that I implemented at Tennessee State University at Jackson State, to ensure and to actually have students to have an opportunity to get more school districts involved, because we offer that dual certification in instead of SPED and ESL, which I did in Tennessee. I'm offering elementary ed and special education as dual certification when they complete their degree. Now, those are critical areas in the state of Mississippi, and I would suggest that in working with your partners, identify where their shortages are and work to develop those programs to help them get those teachers in front of students in their school districts.
Thank you for that. We're halfway through our panelists so far, and already the common themes of partnerships, right? I also think you're clearly hearing persistence. And what I mean by that is the work that Prentice, Sarah, Jerry, you all have done, and I know the other three of you have too, because I know you all too well. It is not just persistence of the students, but you all to do something different, to do something that is changing the game. And then let me just call out, if it's not, this might be Captain Obvious, nothing that we have heard in any way, shape, or form has lowered the quality. If anything, these three programs are more rigorous than the average program out there, and they're doing it where folks are having those financial barriers removed. So this is why y'all are here on this panel, because you're doing really awesome work. And so speaking of awesome work, Tina, the University of Florida was selected by the State Department, Florida Department of Ed, to design the standards for teacher apprenticeships for the entire state's bachelor's degree pathway. And this is after you already had the first ever registered apprenticeship in Florida with a master's degree pathway. Can you talk to me about working both with the state, but as well as your peers of other EPPs throughout the state to create a win-win scenario?
Yeah, David, thank you so much. Thanks for the question and the opportunity to talk about the work in Florida. We were, as you mentioned, we were early adopters of the concept of teaching apprenticeship with a master's program, but we're behind the previous three speakers in terms of our pre-baccalaureate apprenticeships. It was just put in statute this spring, and as David mentioned, we were really honored to be asked by the department to lead the state's efforts in pulling together the standards of apprenticeship at the pre-baccalaureate level, and probably more importantly, getting our peer institutions on board, which was a bigger lift. And I can't even tell you how much I wish I'd had the opportunity to talk to Prentice and Sarah and Jerry prior to this work, because we're figuring out some of the very same things on our own as we go. So the very first thing that we did, and again, in terms of keys to success, I think transparency and communication at the beginning are absolutely essential. Anyone who's done this work, especially at the state level, has, I'm sure, encountered, maybe everybody's not as cynical and skeptical as higher ed in Florida, but some of my colleagues are a little skeptical. And so there were a lot of concerns, some of which were based on reality and needed to be addressed and acknowledged, and some which came from the rumor mill, right? So the very first thing we had to do was be sure that we were clear and transparent and talk to anybody who would talk to us. We gave multiple opportunities for stakeholders in the state to communicate with us any ideas that they had. And then we used that information to create a task force, again, of stakeholders. And the key to win-win is in David's question, right? It's bringing together the State Department of Education people, along with districts and colleges and universities who are the educator preparers. It became very clear very quickly, and this won't surprise anybody who's done this work, districts were very enthusiastic. In Florida, there are state colleges or community colleges. They were curious, a little reserved, but curious, and universities are like, oh no, we can't possibly do this. That was the initial reaction out of the gate. And so it was very important to hear all of those perspectives initially, and to understand that there is a potential for loss for educator preparation programs that have all of their eggs in the traditional undergraduate teacher preparation basket. We had to be clear that we heard what they were saying when they said, we're afraid this is going to kill our programs. And so that was a reality that we would have been foolish to ignore. So we acknowledged that. But what helped us move to a more productive conversation. And this is very similar, Prentice, to what you said, recognizing that we had several things in common. And first and foremost, everybody who engaged in the conversation and the work was passionate about having high quality teachers for every single student in every single school in the state of Florida. And anybody who's paid attention at all knew that that wasn't happening. And that despite our best efforts, and I'm saying this as a university person, universities and colleges were not preparing enough people to reach that goal, which was everybody's goal. So that was the first one. Second of all, increasing access to higher education is something that we found that universities and colleges universally got behind. Even if, like a place like the University of Florida, where our traditional student is, 18 to 22, they move to Gainesville, Florida, and they go to school. But we believe that increasing access, and we have some pathways for doing that, are tremendously important. That's why the university developed UF Online. So that was a common theme that we could work around, that increasing access, inviting in the people in the communities who just couldn't quit their jobs and move to a place like Gainesville to finish their education, that was a good, right? Everybody could agree with that. And then the thing I think that turned the universities around the most goes back to that partnership with a capital P. I'm going to steal that one. We've talked for years about the importance of more meaningful partnerships between preparation programs and districts, and giving our students really high quality evidence-based experiences in classrooms. And so once we came to recognize this is actually something that we want to do, that we've all wanted to do for a long time, we were able to shift the conversation away from fear of loss. There was a great fear, of course. There's always a fear when there's a change that it's going to lower quality. Doesn't have to. In fact, it could really improve it. It gave us a chance to talk about innovations that we've long wanted to do anyway. And so we did have a productive conversation. I think we were able to register the Department of Education. We helped, along with David and his team, to register the pre-baccalaureate standards for apprenticeship in Florida. And this fall, the Department of Education is rolling out some development funds for educator preparation programs. So hopefully a year from now, I'll have some success stories.
Thanks, Tina. I think one thing I just want to highlight is, when you use the words that you feel that you're behind other places. Well, Florida is still in the first 20 states to launch a registered apprenticeship. And it's not about being behind. I would say it's like the stock market. The best day to invest was yesterday. So the best day to have launched a teacher residency, grow your own registered apprenticeship was yesterday. Therefore, the second best day is today. This is all about learning from each other. And please, look, Prentice is being very kind to me, because what he's not telling you is 3.5 years ago, when him and our good friend Sean Imperatrice approached me, the first words out of my mouth were, "What's a registered apprenticeship?" So I've already asked the dumbest question possible. And if I can learn, anybody can learn. So we all want to, avoid the mistakes we've made for the benefit of kids. And that's why I'm so grateful to have each of you here. And so speaking of awesome work happening in multiple states, Kimberly, so glad to have you here. And thanks for being here from Reach University. Reach is doing incredible work, as I just said, in multiple states throughout the country. Can you talk to me about two things? One, Reach's focus on hiring active teachers or teachers of the year and other practitioners to teach current students. And then also how your model's affordability allows it to serve what I would refer to as certain EPP deserts, where some districts might not have as many options as they would be in a more centralized location.
Sure. Thank you so much. And I'm living my best life just listening to the other panelists. Oh gosh, this work's exciting. All right. So to the question at hand, you mentioned first to tell you a little bit about maybe the why that Reach recruits a very specific person to be a professor of an ed prep program. That very specific person is highly effective classroom teachers, and unapologetically so. So I guess the place to start, I'm going to teacher you for a second, like begin with the end in mind. Like if you think about the places and the people who Reach serves. So we're in Louisiana and Arkansas and Alabama, some really rural parts of California, a touch of Colorado. And in these areas, it's mostly rural, urban areas, like places that were super hard to staff way before COVID ever decimated the pipeline, right? And so if you think about like our particular candidates, they're all 100% job embedded. So they're all paraprofessionals or school janitors, and we're not direct recruiters, and we have completely open admissions. So you've got folks who would be really great if they could get an education and they could have, access to the pipeline and access and support to become licensed. So you've got those, and you've got this major standardized test. So you've got folks with gaps, you've got folks who have been away from college from perhaps a very long time, and you have a standardized test, which is praxis. Who wouldn't flinch at that job? Professional educators. So that's the first thing. And then whenever I think about the other opportunities that we've got, because our folks are 100% job embedded, it means that every day there's an opportunity to positively impact student learning, like the next day. And so for that, it was never a question in my mind whenever I came on as the dean about who I was going to recruit and hire. I've got to have the very best folks. And it's not just that they're award-winning teachers, right? That about 20% of our faculty are, I would say 95% are folks that are just actively known. We have professors of practice, like they're killing it. They're teaching, they're leading, they're superintendents all day. They understand the landscape, they understand the urgency. They want to turn education around and impact learning like so much. They can taste it. You could feel it every single day. And we need that type of energy in front of our candidates, because a lot of them, they may have been failed by K-12 the first time around, and they are in this really unique opportunity to serve students and to be able to be really stronger practitioners again tomorrow, not in 4 years, not in 3 years, but tomorrow whenever they walk into work. So it just makes sense to us, like, to stack the deck for our candidates, and never to stack it against them. And that's the best way, like put the very best practitioners that are modeling excellent teaching. And I think about it a lot, like we're a profession. You wouldn't want like folks in the medical profession, like teaching at a medical school who've never medicked, right? Or who aren't really great surgeons. So that's kind of the idea behind it. We're going to the Super Bowl. We want the best team. We want the best players. And so that's how that came about. And then the second question you mentioned about affordability, right? And what you called the ed prep deserts. And affordability is one piece of it. So our program it's $75 a month for the duration of the time that it takes for them to get their degree. And oftentimes our districts actually help a little bit with that, because $75 a month sounds really inexpensive, but not if you're getting paid $12 an hour as a school support professional. So it's so important to understand that the desert is way more vast than even the income barrier, like the cost barrier. There's a desert in so many different ways. This program could be free. And if we didn't have a lot of supports in place, people still wouldn't be able to come and to take of it. Like you can, have people step up to the plate, but if they don't have a bat, if they don't have a way to get to the game, right? So we're trying to diminish barriers in so many other ways. And the cost is one, and it's huge, and it's what most people hear about if they've heard of Reach. But honestly, having our courses very late at night, being very supportive over the fact that people are caregivers, they've got kids on their lap, and we celebrate that. We're really excited about it. They may be at their kids' football game and they're still these really engaged learners. So it's just lower that barrier. Make sure that you've got really talented educators teaching them that are going to help them work, help them feel like they belong. Having a really diverse and representative faculty so that they can always find someone that they identify with, to remind them that we're better because you're here, you belong in this space, you're going to be such a great teacher, your community needs you. They need to hear these messages, because there are reasons why they weren't able to go more traditional routes or approach more traditional routes earlier in their lives. So none of those things are lost. And hopefully we're creating an oasis where there is a desert, because we know 100% that champions are enrolled in our program, and it was never talent that was lacking in these areas. It has always been opportunities that have been lacking.
Yeah. I love it. Preaching to the choir. Love everything you're saying. I think one of the things too is, with everybody on this panel, I know that I've never once heard any of you say, well, our professors only teach 9 to 5. And it all goes back to the partnerships, right? It's finding out what does your partner need, and then you all provide a way to meet folks where they are at. Next up, and certainly not least for our panels, and I think I owe her an apology, is Kathleen. And the reason I owe her an apology is the last couple panels we have done together were in Hawaii and in England. And so this is a bit of a letdown to do a Zoom webinar, but maybe we could just both set a tropical background and pretend we're in another place. Anyways, Kathleen, one really cool thing about you is you're a former dean, and now you're, serve as the CEO of the National Center for Teacher Residencies. And one of the things we've talked a lot today from these multiple examples, I love the backgrounds that I'm seeing change, Kimberly, is that we can have high quality programs at an affordable cost. And yet one of our shared goals is the future effectiveness, but even more and equally important is the retention of these teachers. Can you talk to me about the return on investment? If, as a person who formerly worked at a state, if I'm investing money, if I'm a district investing money in this, that return on investment, being a good steward of taxpayer dollars, is when we think about the benefits of a teacher residency program.
Sure. Thanks, David. And thanks, Prentice and Kimberly, because now I feel like I'm in the tropics, so even on a webinar. So there's really 4 main areas that we like to highlight at NCTR for return on investment. And I could talk about this all day long. And so the first really starting with teacher resident recruitment. Over the last 5 years, we have seen an increase in our partner programs, such as Dallas College with Sarah here today. We've seen an increase in the number of applicants to residencies, the number of teacher residents accepted and enrolled, and the number, to Jerry's point, of teacher residents who have graduated from the program. And I don't think that that's a surprise to probably any of us on this screen when we start to think about how residencies and apprenticeships, which are both part of the Grow Your Own pathways, help to kind of push against those perennial challenges that have faced education. In addition, the second area that we really start to dive a little deeper in at NCTR is teacher diversity. And Prentice mentioned this earlier, when you have to look at what are the challenges districts are facing. And so all of us on the screen know that historically we have had a mismatch, right? Of how many individuals or teachers of color, especially now, since 2014, compared to how many kids of color there are in school systems. Well, I'm really excited to tell you, when we looked at our research from the 2022-2023 academic year, 69% of individuals who were residents enrolled in our partner programs identified as people of color. That's compared to 21% of people of color nationally as teachers. And then 49% of mentor teachers, or in some states you'll call them cooperating teachers, also identified as people of color. And one thing I like to highlight is a number of those mentor or cooperating teachers actually were residents themselves. The difference is residencies have been around long enough that they're now giving back to the program, and they are now the mentor teachers or cooperating teachers. And so we're really excited to see the diversity in both areas. The third return on investment, I would tell you, probably again is near and dear to all of our hearts, is teacher quality. So when we survey principals from our partner programs, and I should tell you that we work with programs in 26 states in the United States and the District of Columbia. And more than 90% of the principals reported that residents were more effective than the typical first-year teacher. And then when you ask the graduates themselves, 88% report feeling like they were really prepared to go into the classroom and teach year one. And any of us, like myself, who have been in education probably for a long period of time now, knows that we would have loved to have heard that data years ago. And so it shows that innovations like Grow Your Own programs are working. And then lastly, we need to talk about retention. So when we look at our partner programs with NCTR, 86% of graduates return for a third year of teaching. And again, it's showing that not only do they feel that they are more prepared, but they're actually returning to the classroom year after year. Because one, it doesn't mean that others weren't committed, but they have this commitment to teach in their own communities. They did not end up saddled with debt. And so they actually feel like they are more prepared to teach. And I'm really excited about the work that we're seeing.
Absolutely. It's incredible work that you all are doing. And so time check, folks, we have 8 minutes. And so these next questions are for whoever would like to go at them. And so the first question that I want to ask this panel collectively is, what efforts as deans or those in university leadership are in your locus of control to reduce costs or gain access to funding? And if they're not in your locus of control, what have you done to try to address them? Anybody who wants to start, go for it.
So
I'll take it. I'll start. When we started at Tennessee State University and trying to keep the costs under $10,000, I went to my president and I said, okay, if this is going to be a win-win situation, what can we do? And when you look at the cost of under $10,000 for the coursework, and then you look at the cost for them to take those certification exams, which was roughly $300 to $400 for them to become certified in SPED and ESL. So that was an agreement which says that the university will take on the additional cost for students to complete the program. And that way, that was a selling point to school districts that didn't have access to the funding to do so at that time, where they didn't have to take on the cost, because now we had the State Department and TSU taking on the expense. Now that I'm at Jackson State, the same thing applies, where Mississippi Department of Education offers money for students and their supplementary and up to $17,000 in their stipends. But working with individual school districts, where we've had that conversation, now school district is saying, okay, we've got some in that Grow Your Own initiative with the Department of Education, but we have more slots available that we can pay for if you can meet us halfway on the cost. And so we have implemented what is called the junior middle college, where we work with juniors and seniors to receive their associate degree while they're still in high school and attend JSU for their 2 years of college while they're still in high school. So it's a dual credit pathway for them. And when they complete high school, they will have completed 2 years of JSU and will only have 2 years of college to complete to become a certified math education teacher, because that is the critical need. And so the school district is paying half and JSU is paying for those students to complete the program during their share. So it's where you have that communication and you partner with the school district to find out what sources they have, whether they come from ESSA or whatever funding source that they have. And one of the things that we discuss in their sense is looking at their professional development from federal funds that they could use to pay for that. And then the cost for students to get the dual credit that the state pays or the district pays, and for JSU to come in and pick up the cost for them to attend JSU. So it's a matter of having those conversations, as Prentice said at the beginning, what you can do and what the school district can do, and how we can bond together to make it a win-win situation to meet the needs of those individuals.
That's great. Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Anyone else care to add?
I would just say it doesn't cover the cost, but one way we've been successful in offsetting the cost is philanthropy. It's such a beautiful story that resonates with people who want to give back. You can help someone who is a paraprofessional and not able to access in one of those deserts, as Kimberly described, become an excellent teacher. And that story has resonated with some of our donors.
David, my story is similar to Jerry's, but it's worth asking your president and your provost, do they actually, does the university where you work actually care about teacher ed? Like a very pointed, like, if we care, we're going to have to do things differently. And so the first time I asked my bosses that question, they said, you know, well, of course we do. We have a college of education. And that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking if we really care. And so what I would say, and it wasn't intended to be a political statement, but it wound up being one of the most popular political statements that a university president could ever make, which is, we care so much about children and teaching and schools and teachers that our university, our state funded university, is willing to cut the tuition by 50%. That's a statement. And then you work with community colleges, which in Tennessee are basically free. You've cut the entire, because you work with folks and because you had conversations about constraints and what you can do, you've cut the cost of a college education down to a quarter of what it would cost. Most of the school districts can play ball with you when you come to the table saying, hey, this thing costs a quarter of what, and someone's mentioned this, but that's before that's before any financial aid, before any grants. So my story is a little more forward than the others, but that's how I did it. If we care, we're going to do things differently.
That's great. Yeah, please.
You know, when I was dean at the University of St. Thomas, Prentice, I hear you on that. You had to have the frank conversation with the provost and president. But the other part I just want everyone to think about is, while we were able to reduce costs, what we actually found is we ended up with more of an enrollment than we had before. So I don't want individuals listening to the webinar to think, well, now we're going to reduce costs. What are we going to do? We slashed our prices and then had so many more students coming in, we actually ended up with more. And so keep that in mind as you have those conversations.
I would double down on what was just said. That's exactly what happened with us. In Tennessee, there's a funding formula where we are awarded funding dollars based on the number of people we graduate. So it's not free. We're getting, you know, half or a quarter of what it would cost, plus the money on the backside from the funding formula. And yes, we have more students. And so it's not like we're losing money. We're making money. If that's your jam, if making money is what you're in, if that's your question, that's what we're doing. But yeah, it's a really good.
All right. I'm gonna ask one last question, but I'm just gonna gear it towards Sarah and Kimberly for this last one, and only Sarah and Kimberly if you care to answer it. And that is, as you heard, all the leadership represented today has done not only great but innovative work. I'm just curious if a ed prep provider is listening today, and we have well over 100 on right now, and we have over 230, 40 that will get the recording. What's one piece of advice you offer to them, or what's the first place they should start if they want to offer high quality, low cost pathways?
I can start with this. So with Dallas College, our program is really new, right? Like, we just launched in 2021. And the way we launched was by asking ourselves, what is the problem we're trying to solve for? And so I think that you have to be crystal clear about what is it that you, as an ed prep program, like, what's the challenge that you're trying to solve around? And then bring your district partners to the table, bring a big community to the table to solve around that challenge. I know it might sound really simple, but for us, what we were really thinking about is, we had paraprofessionals, bus drivers, teaching assistants in early childhood centers who had been shut out of higher ed in the Dallas area for generations. And so what we were solving around is, what does it look like to serve these students well so that we can strengthen and diversify the teaching workforce for North Texas? And when you bring that question to the table, and you bring everybody around the table and just say, what do we need to do differently, right? like what's the problem? What do we need to do differently? You can come up with creative solutions that are going to serve students well, and then these students are going to serve our K-12 and little ones well for generations.
Thank you, Sarah. Kimberly, closing us out.
Sure. And that was awesome. And she ended, Sarah did, with talking about the need to do things differently. And I think if somebody's asking, like, what step do I take next? Just move forward. Like, just move forward. You just don't go back, right? Because we have generations of what hasn't been working. A lot of times, just whenever you're trying to do innovative work, especially in higher ed, the question is, well, where's the data? Where's the research? And I can't tell you what it looks like yet, but I can tell you what has failed, and I can give you lots of data for what that looks like whenever we're not keeping our promises to children and the promise of education, right? So that's the one thing. It can seem really overwhelming, but we all have a locus of control that is perfect for that space and that time. And we can do so much more together. Like the old adage, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Bring people in, but never forget what you're trying to do. What are you trying to do? Like eradicate teacher shortage. That's huge, but it's no big deal if you're steadfast in that. It's going to be hard. There are going to be challenges and obstacles. We'd be doing the things if we knew how to do the things. But if you just keep moving forward and you refuse to go backward and you refuse to give up on whatever it is, then you're going to make headway, and it may take a long time. It's a lot easier for me to look back 3 years ago than it was to look into tomorrow, whenever 3 years ago was my present. But you have to keep moving forward, and I think that's definitely the mindset that classroom teachers have. If we always went into it with how hard it's going to be or how impossible the challenge is, then we wouldn't be very good at our jobs. And if you're an educator, then you already have, I think, the skill set you need to get started. So that's what I would say. Just keep moving and don't worry about everything, because it'll bog you down.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think too often we demonize incremental progress. That's progress. Too many times we suffer from analysis paralysis and we do nothing at all. And so I just want to thank this first panel. As our second panel turns their screens on, please. But Tina, Kathleen, Sarah, Jerry, Prentice, Kimberly, thank you so much for the incredible work you all are doing. It is awesome. And now we are going to transition to folks representing national stakeholders across the country to reflect on what they heard and also talk about what their folks need from other ed prep providers. And so we're going to go ahead and dive right on in. First, I just want to say thank you to Todd, Valerie, Rosalind, and Alan for being here today. And for sake of time, jumping in. Valerie, you lead Deans for Impact, awesome organization. And Deans for Impact supports innovative deans, some who were just featured on the earlier panel, via its Impact Academy, of which, as I just shared, you have many members and alumni from earlier in the first panel. Based on what you see nationally, how can we help scale innovative programs, ed prep programs, led by extraordinary leaders that are high quality and low cost?
Yeah, thanks, David. It's a great question, and just really appreciative for you bringing such an amazing group of people together to bring their brains and their minds around this challenge. You know, at Deans for Impact, we really think about working on this at 3 different levels of the system. So working at the level of policy, at the level of EPP leaders, and then at the level of teacher educators, because I think it requires pulling on all 3 of those if we're going to be able to scale programs that are both high quality and low cost. You know, Prentice talked about the belief system in place, that there's been this belief or maybe acceptance that you can't have both high quality and low cost. And I think part of the reason for that is because in higher ed particularly, incentive systems aren't necessarily set up for EPPs to prioritize deep instructional quality or deep partnerships with K-12 systems. And we hear that a lot from the leaders that we work with. I think there's a moment in time here where some of those incentives are shifting with some of the different things we've seen emerging in the policy space. So for example, the national guideline standards for registered apprenticeships in teaching one of the main components of that is that those are competency-based programs. And I think that really gives leaders an opportunity to work with communities to really define together what it is that they want teachers to know and be able to do. And those guidelines say that EPPs and district leaders really need to work together to co-construct those pathways so that the coursework and the clinical experiences are interdependent and complementary. So I think, at the policy level, how do we create more opportunities for incentives like that for leaders? And then for leaders, how do we support them in seeing where those incentives may be shifting and to take advantage of those in order to really emphasize this dual focus on quality and affordability and accessibility? The other thing that we think about, particularly at the leader level, and you kind of heard this from some of the panelists earlier, is the value in having a community to work together on some of these problems. I think Tina mentioned that she had called some of these other folks early on in the process to chat about the things that they had learned. I think this is really difficult work for leaders, both in kind of a design sense, but then also in a change leadership sense. And so we've seen real power when we create communities of leaders that can tackle both some of the design questions and some of the change leadership questions together, where they can problem solve, bounce ideas off, and to something someone said earlier, kind of shore each other up so that they can persist in what can feel like barrier after barrier being thrown up at them. I think the last thing I'd say, is it also requires supporting teacher educators to think differently, both in terms of what it means to deliver meaningful learning opportunities in ways that are have different delivery mechanisms, are more accessible, lower cost, but also around mindsets that teacher educators might have about the types of aspiring teachers and what they're capable of. So in some of our work with faculty, we've seen that they might start off with this idea that folks coming through different pathways, like paraprofessionals who might not have a 4-year degree, might not be capable of the same kind of rigorous work that people coming through more traditional pathways might be capable of. And we've seen that with really intentional work and exposure, those mindsets can shift, but it takes being intentional about it. Otherwise, teacher educators can fall into this trap of thinking that certain types of students can't do the work to be a teacher.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Valerie, especially that last point. I get pretty frustrated when I hear about upskilling people. I'm like, these people have the skills. As a former first-year teacher, my paraprofessional was the teacher of record. I was learning from her, right? And so it's not about upskilling, it's about removing the barriers, or helping them get that credential, that piece of paper a lot of the times in this case. So thank you for sharing that. Alan, so good to see you. Haven't seen you in a minute, but it was great to hang out in England together. Alan, you're with the National Rural Education Association, which you lead, but also you actively work in a university preparation program. Too often, we suffer from aspiring teachers in rural areas not having access to ed prep providers, as the closest one could be well over an hour away. That goes back to that EPP desert situation. What solutions have you seen to meet aspiring teachers where they are at and to provide them with options?
First of all, Dave, thanks for the invite and allowing me to be a part of this, and seeing so many familiar faces and names now that are on the board. I'm going to just quickly say Kimberly was right when she's talking about how people, when they need to start this. I was kind of thrown into this world last June, and just going and moving forward is the way to do this. What we're seeing across the country, especially in these rural areas, and I'll just spotlight Missouri State's doing an unbelievable job in this, in the work they're doing. But in this work from the EPP side and the National Rural Ed side, you got to go out and have relationships with these LEAs and these districts. And if you don't have relationships with them, you don't know what the needs are going to be. And I think Valerie said, which I wrote it down, Valerie, I'm going to steal this from you, co-construct pathways. that's what I did. Didn't even know I was doing that with the work here. We were co-constructing pathways with LEAs, and I was delivering books. I was meeting them where they are. We were doing LEA classes with some of their central office folks being the adjuncts. That's going on at Missouri State. That's what we're rolling into here at UTC. It's going to them. It's different modalities to meet different regions of our rural areas of the country, but especially in our state. And then we hope to move this, across state lines and all this good stuff to work and move this forward. But, and Dave, if I can just, you'll bear with me, tell one quick story. And you talked about being a first year teacher and your paraprofessional was tons better than you in the classroom. When I was a principal, I had a paraprofessional, still paraprofessional to this day. She's 27 years in. She's in our Grow Your Own program, teacher apprenticeship. I go deliver her books and I go, hey, how's your, how do you feeling? What's going on? And I used to coach. So she calls me coach. She goes, Coach, I'm a 4.0 and I'm going to be a teacher by fall of 24. That seals the deal for everything that we need. She'll be an unbelievable special ed teacher. And she's the kind of folks we need in this, and she's going to stay in a rural community. She's going to do the right things for rural communities. So that's kind of what we're seeing. And I think, teaching from the central office or having classes or what we call summer boot camps, where we bring them in for 2 weeks and they do certain things to get the credit and all that good stuff. So all those are kind of on the table, and we're excited about the process.
Thank you, Alan. Appreciate it. Todd, you are the head of the state apprenticeship agency for the state of Connecticut, but you're also the head of the National Association for State Apprenticeship Agencies, which I believe is 33 states now, and you have a big national conference next week. And so, but Todd, the reason I think Alan hit on it with the paraprofessional, I know this works very personal for you. And so you shared previously in other settings that doing free or unpaid student teaching is a barrier for aspiring teachers. I know you've spoken much strongly than that, but I want to set you up. Can you share more about your thoughts on that and how labor can play a role in the training of aspiring teachers?
Sure, David. Thank you. And to all the panelists, I'm the apprentice guy. That being said, I'm usually in a room full of educators, but everybody's scratching their head of who am I and why am I here? This has been fantastic, and thank you for the opportunity to not only speak on this, but the participants that have been here, well over 100. This is fantastic. Apprenticeship has long been thought of just for trades only. Apprenticeship also goes by other names: resident, junior, associate, probie, rookie. We in the apprenticeship world no longer have the teaching profession on our list to integrate our model. It's on the top of our list. We celebrate that, and the partnerships we all have. That word partnerships has been fantastic over and over again. We're talking about LEAs and districts and so on and so forth. Please also partner with your state apprenticeship director. The buck does not stop there. The partnership also starts there with all things apprenticeship. So that being said, why do you ask why we celebrate this? Isn't apprenticeship looked upon as lesser than and not equal to education? Is it the antithesis of education? Fact is that there is a teacher shortage. Problem is that it's referred to as the paper ceiling. And we believe that a registered apprenticeship is a solution, not just the solution. It's a solution. The barrier exists because individuals have to have the privilege of pursuing a teaching career, and they must experience immediate indebtedness as the only path to certification. Experiential learning can only be accomplished by experience. That's why we applaud the apprenticeship model. The bridge to professional practice from academia to professional practice for educators is a toll bridge. There's no question about that. It's a toll bridge. By significantly, and I'm glad people were saying this before, significantly reducing the financial barriers of becoming a paid teacher apprentice is in no way diminishing what is necessary to become certified, as my wife has, and that's why you said it's personal to me. It's a solution to remedy the teacher shortage. In high time, you're compensated just like cops, firefighters, electricians, plumbers that are paid to hone their skills via being mentored with their tangible skill development. And also, it's not about cost, it's the price. If we don't continue to augment this and the great work of this panel, the folks that are on this today, the price is, again, it's going to hurt the children. So question about that. And again, with apprenticeship, there's two things I'd like to close with. We're often referred to as the original four-year degree, my friends. And it all goes back to experiential learning, combining that bridge between academia to practicum. And please, I know there's been conversations about paras becoming educators. My wife's been a special ed para for 22 years. Please don't steal them from me. I need them too. There are plenty of folks that we could start talking about high school kids that we could get into para-pro, and right out of high school, let's make them paraprofessionals, and then let's find them paths and opportunities to get funded to become the next teacher educator. So please don't steal my paras. So that was being said, thank you for this opportunity.
It's so good to have you, Todd. Thanks for being here today. Rosalind, thank you as well for being here today. And you're representing the Council of Chief State Schools Officers, CCSSO, which is the national group for all state chiefs, superintendents, commissioners, et cetera. And so you all have at CCSSO and in your direct work, Rosalind, a national perspective on what states are dealing with when it comes to teacher recruitment and retention. Can you share what states need from educator preparation providers to be successful? And also, do you have any great examples of partnerships that are driving results between states and their EPP partners that you'd care to share?
David, thanks so much. That's a really big question. We've been able to, at CCSO, we've been able to chronicle ESSER spending in relation to teacher recruitment and retention. And we've seen almost every state put a significant amount of their ESSER dollars into recruitment and retention efforts for teachers, because as we understand with the pandemic, it just elevated the need for teachers in both urban and rural areas, especially teachers of color, male teachers. The need was just magnified through the pandemic. So these ESSER dollars have been very impactful in supporting states and developing different types of partnerships in order to grow their own. So thinking about what it takes to make these partnerships work, you have to have a wonderful relationship or an effective relationship, which we hope is then wonderful, with the EPP. And some promising practices we've gleaned from states doing this work is there are many of the topics that my colleagues have touched on this call. So an EPP that is ready and willing to remove barriers to entry. So in addition to cost, it's also the praxis, transcripts, things like that are also an additional barrier, as well as location. If we're looking at rural communities, it's harder to get to these higher ed institutions. So, excuse me, I apologize. So there has to be innovation on behalf of the district or state partner, as well as our higher ed partners, to think through what these barriers are and figure out how to best mitigate or even better remove them so that we can democratize the process for our future teachers to come into the field. Also, we've seen success with EPPs that, as we talked about earlier, really work hard to embed experiential learning throughout the experience. And then again, figuring out how to make it feasible for everyone to do it. So not just our 3 months, I went the traditional route, so not just our 3 months in the classroom at the end of your program, but how do we ensure that there are continued stints within classrooms, within schools, so that you're learning those soft skills that you may not get in a classroom. So being able to build classroom culture, being able to build relationships, and not just with students, but with your colleagues within the school, how we get to know your community. Those types of clinical and experiential experiences need to be elevated and dispersed across our EPPs. And states that had the most success are able to partner with their EPPs to design these types of experiences based upon the need of the SEA or the district in which the EPP is supporting. Also, we find that, and I think a couple of my colleagues alluded to this, that EPPs that have the best track record in supporting our states or districts with non-traditional programs are those that take feedback really well. So with that, you're working to diversify where you get feedback from. So it's not just the loudest, it's your quietest, it's your ones who are, your people who are furthest away from opportunity that we need to get information and feedback from in order to curate programs to best suit the needs of the people whom we're trying to entice into our programs. And then lastly, we've seen, especially with Grow Your Own, that there is an investment in building and cultivating local talent. So there are programs that recruit nationally, and we've seen, looking at the data and trends, that many times those teachers do not stay in those areas. There's more, you have a better outcome with recruiting locally and supporting the local talent who will be more invested within their communities, and that works for both rural and urban areas. And a couple of states that have really figured this out, Alan mentioned Missouri. They're doing some great work around their Grow Your Own programs. And with their unique partnerships, they've been able to add 45% more EPPs than they've had previously, pre-COVID, in supporting them and increasing enrollment in EPP programs and Grow Your Own programs. And then these teachers moving into education positions within the state and staying. So it's a wonderful partnership that the state has been able to cultivate with EPPs and be able to develop more of a place-based curriculum and set of supports for candidates that are in their programs, which then encourage an understanding of culture, curriculum, population, and also allow them to invest in the community they're in and stay and teach. In addition, Nevada is doing some great work as well with their Grow Your Own programs, and they've been able to pull together a consortium of EPPs. And with that consortium, they're able to advertise and support almost 200 future educators through stipends, support within their program, as well as outside their program, to encourage them to not just stay, but excel in the teaching profession in Nevada. So those are two really strong models. However, there are dozens more that are in existence and are growing across the country.
Yeah, I figured that last part of the question was a little unfair, like picking your favorite child. You have
exactly.
So
like, oh, what about New York and all of that? So there's so many.
That would be like asking Valerie her favorite dean that she gets to work with, which we will not do. So the next question, these questions now are for anybody, any of the four of you. The first question: do you feel as though educator preparation providers and your respective stakeholders are working more closely together than before? If so, how can we leverage that? And if not, what can we do to fix that? Does anybody care to kick that one off? Alan, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, just speaking locally here, I mean, we used to have the average partnerships like we had in the past, and with Grow Your Own and the Tennessee teacher apprenticeship work, and we went from 10 to 15 LEAs that we worked with traditionally, that we're probably over 75 right now across the state. Once this gets started and once people realize there's a program, and then we have specially programmed far as we do a K-5 ESL, and we do some things in SPED. Once that gets started, people hear about it, and I'm not lying. I mean, I get 4 emails a day from folks wanting to start the program, and we're like, we'll work with you. We're trying to get this going, but we're limited sometimes just because we are using ESSER dollars at the state level to fund some of this. So we're in the, I think Prentice mentioned earlier, they were doing a model long before anyone else in the state of Tennessee, and they were doing this where the LEA paid and they had a share, and he's right. Our community colleges are pretty much free. There's dollars out there that these folks can use. Well, we're kind of in that process of developing those relationships, and we had a Grow Your Own 1.0 that David, you were part of a lot of that here in our state, and then we're in Grow Your Own 2.0, and we're going to be in the 3.0 4.0 as we move this thing forward. So I think that's what we're finding out, that these partnerships, and we always say we're Mountain City, Tennessee to Memphis, Tennessee. That's our coverage right now, which has never been that way before. And we're getting North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky that are outreaching and just saying, hey, we want to be in this. We're like, right now we can't. So, that's our goal, is to spread this out across, Tennessee covers, I think, touches 6 or 7 states. And I just failed my Tennessee history class in 8th grade, but we do. And I think that's the key for us moving forward.
That's great. Next question then, I didn't see anyone come off mute. That's I'm learning. Is based on, actually, I'm going to switch to a different question because of time. I'm curious, and this one's going to come off as a little negative, but it's not, but it's real. We know that there are low quality ed prep providers out there that are affordable. How can we work with your stakeholders to not sacrifice quality for quantity?
I can go with that. As it's apprenticeship, it's an employer-driven model, period. End of discussion. The employer is the district and maybe the State Department of Education to insist that those providers improve their quality or be disregarded. It's a bold statement that you make, David, and a bold retort is necessary. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll actually just speak to that really quick. As Alan alluded, back in Tennessee, we had 42 ed prep providers when I was the chief of human capital there, and I oversaw ed prep. With Grow Your Own and registered apprenticeship, we only allowed 14 to be in it. It was an intentional way of being able to raise the bar. If we're going to spend taxpayer dollars, let's spend it on high quality programs. Anybody else care to speak to that one, or would you like me to move on?
Well, David,
Valerie?
I'll just say, we work with EPP leaders who are in places where they are experiencing competition from some of these low quality partners. And one of the things that we talk about with them is you're going to need to be able to compete on some of the things like affordability and accessibility, flexibility. And we know that the EPP leaders we work with can deliver with quality. And so the design challenge for them is, how do you do that in a way that is affordable, that is flexible, accessible, so that it's not a question of necessarily raising the bar for those low quality providers, although we hope that is the case, but also like for the high quality providers, how do we make sure that we're creating pathways that are accessible to more people?
Yep. Based on time, I'm going to ask my good friend Jimmy Adams to turn on his camera, as he's going to be making a major update on the national convening for registered apprenticeships and teaching. And before he speaks, final question for the panel. And Jimmy, feel free to speak to this question as well, just based on your work. And I want to always end on a high note. What gives you hope about the future of the teaching profession and or educator preparation? What gives you hope? We talked a lot of solutions, great work happening. What inspires you?
I'm going to be quick to the point. The 100,000 emails I'm receiving about people wanting to get into the profession and these different pathways to get in. That's the positive. And because people say, well, you can't get folks to be teachers anymore. Well, that's not necessarily true, because we're seeing the outcome of us just opening up the flexibility. And I think Teresa hit it right on. How are you going to be competitive? You got to be flexible. You got to meet them where they are. You got to make it work. When you do that, it's going to happen. So that gives me hope.
Thank you, Alan.
For me, being able to see these grassroots programs and that are blossoming into national programs that are supporting our teachers of color, specifically our Black men, to get into teaching, and the amount of young men that are inspired to move in this direction. So when I see Real Men Teach, or I see Men Can Teach, all these different programs that are sprouting up to espouse like the great things that happen in education and supporting populations that have been historically wounded by public education, inspiring them to come back and heal and support our youth, and seeing how many people come as a result of these efforts, that inspires me that teaching is just, it's being reimagined. Education and what our teachers look and feel and sound like, and what classrooms look and feel and sound like, are being reimagined because of these efforts and programs, because people feel so strongly that we have to get the right people in the right place at the right time for our kids.
Absolutely.
You're absolutely
Todd?
right on that, Rosalind. Hope is not a plan, but inspiration leads to innovation, and innovation leads to success. It's okay to do this. It's because everybody else did this and say, well, I went through this. This is what everybody else should do. It's a broken model. Our skills-based practices need to be the new hiring model. There's no question about it. It's broken. It's really broken. And I think the will of us in innovating here and letting people know it's okay to dip your toe in the water. It's just fine. You're all gonna be just fine. We're not diminishing the occupation by any means. We're making it better. I think that's what needs to happen to augment the prosperity of what we're doing for people that will never be.
I think what gives me hope is, I think there's this narrative out there that EPPs can't change, they won't change. And that is really the opposite of my experience in our day-to-day work at Deans for Impact, that we have deeply passionate, committed leaders and teacher educators who want to make sure they're doing right by the future teachers they're preparing, who want to do right by kids and communities. And it is in providing them with the support, the structures, the resources that we can see that spread beyond just a handful of leaders or a handful of programs. I really believe that's possible because we have amazing leaders and amazing teacher educators around the country. And if we can support them, I think we will do a lot to shift what the teaching profession looks like.
Yeah, Valerie, I love that. I mean, the first panel demonstrates the innovation taking place, but also thanks to organizations like Deans for Impact, National Center for Teacher Residencies. And Rosalind, you made me think about our friends at Center for Black Educator Development, Sharif El-Mekki, one of our other advisory board members, and the Breakthrough Collaborative. They're a really cool organization too, that are developing future pipelines of teachers, specifically with a focus on diversifying the profession. So I just want to thank our panelists, Todd, Rosalind, Alan, and Valerie, for being here. And Jimmy, I'm going to turn it over to you. Feel free to say what gives you hope, but then also share about the latest update that you have, please. Jimmy, take it away.
Well, David, thank you so much for this opportunity. And what gives me hope are meetings like this where people come together and share the work that they are doing. And then I also am able to see that when I see teachers who are telling their students and encouraging them to go into this profession again. And I think that's one of our best recruitment tools that's out there. Again, just to kind of give you a little bit of information about what's coming up, we have the National Convening on Registered Apprenticeships in Teaching. That convening will happen on January 25th and 26th at the St. Anthony Hotel in San Antonio, Texas. Our planning committee has been reviewing the proposals, and we have sent emails out today, actually, informing people that they've been accepted to present those. Unfortunately, we weren't able to accept all proposals. We will have 15 concurrent sessions at this convening, and we had over 50 proposals for presentations. So the committee has tried to be as creative as they can to get as many of those in place as possible. But we will have presentations from districts, from states, and from EPPs and their perspectives on this work around the registered apprenticeships. We will also have 3 general sessions at this conference. It will be a day and a half. And I would tell you to watch for the registration announcements that we think will come out on or after September 18th. That's a Monday here in just a couple of weeks. And the hotel reservation will also be available at that time. So I encourage everyone, make your hotel reservation quickly and make sure you register quickly. There's been enough talk about this that we think it will fill up quickly, because we are limited due to space to about 200 people. So hopefully you can join us. We look forward to a really great convening and starting some really good conversations to help people understand how to create and how to get involved with the registered apprenticeships in teaching.
Well, thank you, Jimmy. We're so excited at the National Center for Grow Your Own to partner with your organization to co-host this event, and your team's been awesome to work with. Thanks again to all the panelists today. Thanks for being patient with me as my first time moderating a webinar, especially 2 panels, and any of the technical difficulties we had. Please send any of the questions that did not get answered to info@ncgyo.org. We did our best to capture them. We will try to send out as many responses as we can, along with a recording of today's webinar or a link to it. And with that, I hope everybody's walking away with a little bit of maybe ideas or things to consider about what is possible and who gets to become a teacher and how they are prepared. And we have innovation happening in HBCUs, in community colleges, in rural serving institutions, in states from Florida to Texas to California, Alabama, you name it. We have Tennessee. We had a lot of great options, and we heard from different group leaders that represent various stakeholders, all that they're doing. So again, thank you so much. Maybe we'll have another webinar someday. Who knows? Stay tuned. But in the meantime, be blessed and keep, as always, putting kids first, and don't stop working until every child has not only the teacher they need, but deserve.